Right, thanks for joining us on this webinar today, which is focused around New Relic and is entitled Accelerating with Confidence. I'm Kevin Durman, who I am the CEO of Kaskade. And for those of you who are not familiar with Kaskade, Kaskade helps their customers migrate to the cloud. We do the consulting work of looking at the different workloads, what can move to the cloud, what should move to the cloud, moving into the cloud, and then helping our customers with a managed service around that, and then adding competitive advantage to their business by utilizing things like monitoring tools like New Relic, as well as advanced technologies like machine learning, artificial intelligence, IoT, and blockchain technologies. We also have cost optimization practice, where we look at how we can add advantage to you and by optimizing your cloud environments and saving you money in the cloud. So today's presentation is around New Relic, and I would like to welcome our co-presenters with me. So sitting with me here is Abdul, and Abdul is in charge of the region from a sales perspective, and often visits South Africa and the rest of Africa, and is based in Dublin. So Abdul, welcome. And then over the line, we have Bruno Toba, who is the VP of Alliances and Channel. And also on the other side, from a technical perspective, is Patrick Din. And Patrick joins us, I believe, from Dublin as well, I think. So Patrick, welcome. We'll be changing over presentation as we go through this presentation. We were having a
Kevin,
bit of...
I figured out my audio. You can hear me now.
Okay,
hopefully.
so Bruno, we can hear you, and Bruno is back on audio, so great that you can hear us, Bruno. All right, so let's get stuck in, and I'd like to just start off by just telling you a little bit about New Relic, and I will then hand over to Abdul. So firstly, if we have a look at the pedigree of the brand of New Relic, this is a company that is really enmeshed in product innovation around the monitoring, the application performance monitoring space, but now they've broadened out to about 6 different products. They are analyzing over 1.8 billion events and metrics per minute, with, I believe, over 20,000 customers now. So really a great deal of success from this particular vendor. They are in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, sitting in that leaders square, which is really great. So we really can expect that kind of leadership from New Relic. And the reason why Kaskade has looked at New Relic and believes that it's a great advantage and a great add-on to any of the technology that you're looking at putting into your environment and into your cloud environment, application environment, is based on this statement. By 2021, at least 50% of global GDP will be in the digital space. This is a comment that came from IDC. And based on that, every business is actually becoming a software business. There's no longer a distinction between what is a software business, what is a digital business. There's an opportunity in every single space. I've often give people the challenge of saying, well, give me a business type of business, a business area, and I will give you a way that it can be digitized and a way that you can enhance that business, even as going as far as saying if it's a funeral parlor, you could digitize that business as well. So we are seeing this environment change before our very eyes, to have every single aspect having a digital element. And of course, where there's a digital element, the customers are interacting with your businesses in a digital manner. And therefore, there is a need to actually understand what is that customer experience about. So New Relic is involved in 3 technology initiatives about cloud adoption, around the DevOps space, and around the digital customer experience. So I'm now going to hand over to Abdul, and Abdul is going to take you through a bit more about New Relic.
Right, good. Sorry, apologies for that, everybody. And just to give you some indication of, like, you know, what as as Kevin alluded to earlier, one of the things that we're very focused on is cloud adoption, DevOps, and digital business. And essentially, when it comes to digital business, it's how you can actually drive value with a digital business. And how you can actually do that with New Relic in what we focus on is essentially these things that you can see on your screen here. We are focused on the customers, essentially. And why we do that is because we've realized a lot of the customers that are successful with New Relic nowadays, or even in the industry, are the ones that are focused on the customers. And then we also focus on the application that actually support those channels that the customers actually talk to, and then the infrastructure that actually sits behind that. And in this case, it would be Azure or on-premise, or in some cases, AWS. And then when you then drill a little bit down, you can see it, a partial level of the network that's actually connecting to that level of connector. Now it's actually affecting your customers. And the good thing about all of this is you see this in real time. We're really easy to use. It's, we support pretty much any modern stack, Ruby, Python, PHP, .NET Core, .NET. So, everything we support, and we're pure SaaS. So we take away all that pain of, maintenance costs. We pretty much look, and we're also API, agnostic as well. Okay. Now, running a digital business is like a team sport. And if anyone, plays any sport, you understand how important each individual person plays their roles. And what we find in most organizations today is that the IT function has an emotional relationship with the rest of the business, because everyone doesn't know what they're doing. So what New Relic gives you is it gives everyone that accountability of ownership of seeing the same data but in different views. So I'll give an example of someone in marketing can actually manage a campaign and seeing how the impact of the improvement of the application is affecting the campaign. And someone in customer care can have the information when the customers ring them, and they're more equipped and skilled to actually deliver a good customer experience to their customers that are actually dialing in. And the developers as well can have information about how the product's actually improving or not. Essentially, most organizations want a digital operation center, and which is somewhere where you can see everything that's actually happening in one screen. And this is a slide that I showed to a customer of mine in Nigeria, which is a very big bank, where they wanted to see essentially, what they wanted to go to just one center where they can see everything that is happening on a digital platform. So they'd be able to see all the consumer applications, the enterprise applications, and the infrastructure and the content that is moving across all these areas. And based on the KPIs of the business, they can see all of this, right? And this business actionable KPIs are where we actually build some very cool dashboards for you to actually act on. The important thing is how you can actually use this data to then make business intelligent decisions, because they're in real time, and allows you to be prepared for what's around the corner. This is an example, very high level example of some of the dashboards that you can see. So if you're a business that is that wants to track the revenue, you can see the monetization on the left hand side there. And if you're someone that wants to track consumer experience, you can also see that. You can see response times of how your application is performing based on each individual location, city, or countries. You can see the availability of your applications or your infrastructure, and you can also see how your DevOps environment is actually being productive or not, how support tickets are being picked up or not. So essentially we help you manage that whole journey of being a digital business. And essentially, just a very high level, the three major things that you need to be focused on New Relic is, number one is observability, where you will help you eliminate the blind spots and find and fix problems quicker. And you have that one single plane view where you can see everything in one view, which is quite important, because that essentially makes you work quicker. And then it's adaptability, actually understanding what the impact of seeing, the data of actually fixing it, how you can actually act accordingly quickly enough so it actually makes less impact on your customers. And then finally, that information is transferred across cross-functional teams to actually enable them to be able to act accordingly as well. And essentially, in a very high level way of actually describing what we do is actually, translating technical data to business data. Thank you. So I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Patrick, who is, on the technical side, who can actually give you a very high level discussion about some technical stuff that New Relic can do.
Excellent, thank you so much. So as always, the first question will be, can everybody see my screen? Can you see my screen? Okay, excellent. And as you just answered my question, you can also hear me, so that's perfect. So what I'm going to do in the next 20 to 30 minutes is to try to give you an overview of how our customers are using New Relic on a daily basis, and I'm going to do this with basically a real life scenario. Obviously, I'm not able to show you the real life data from one of our customers. So the data is basically from my own demo environment. And from time to time, you may well see that it's not 100% realistic data. And maybe I even show you when. But the story is actually built, like I said, after a real e-commerce customer. Obviously, not only e-commerce is one of the topics which we can address. I will also show you from time to time different things or how New Relic can be used in other use cases. To start off the whole user journey, I'm going to start with what you can see on the screen right now, which is a dashboard which I have built in the New Relic Insights platform, which is basically our analytics workbench. In here or in every New Relic customer can build as many dashboards as they want. So you're not limited by any license or anything. So you can build high-level dashboards. You can build dashboards for your teams, or if you want to troubleshoot a technical issue, absolutely no problem. So go ahead and build as many dashboards, widgets as you want, share them with your team, or just use them for yourself. Okay, so I'll start this this small demonstration with a high-level business overview. So this is a dashboard which normally runs like for somebody on a C-level or somebody which is also interested, let's say, in business in intelligence. So it's also a little bit also what we can do with New Relic on the business side. So what you can see here on the screen is one of those high-level business overview dashboards. And the first thing which I would like to show you is this one here, which we can actually see, which is called revenue trend. Now, you already heard us talk about like that we are capturing a lot of performance data and can show them to you basically in real time. And the first thing which I'm going to show you is revenue trend. As we all know, revenue is not really a performance metric. It's much more a business metric. But what does this mean? Basically, with the agents, so basically New Relic gets all of this information into insights and showcase them with the help of agents which are installed on your applications. And those agents are also open. So what we can do, we can actually capture additional, let's say, interesting information from all of those agents. And one of them, in this case, is the revenue. So every time there is a successful transaction where somebody is buying something from this e-commerce site, we are actually pulling out the actual value of this item which is being purchased, and we can actually trace this in real time. As you can also see, we can also compare this to yesterday, the day before, the week before, and so on. So just that we can see how we are doing from a business perspective right now. And this is only just to showcase that we can actually add any type of information to the performance data which we are capturing out of the box, just to make the information which we are gathering much more intelligent and much more actionable. Other things which we can actually do is, for example, stuff like a sales funnel. Obviously, we are not limited to sales funnels. We can funnel any type of user session. So to showcase how your real users are going through your system. So for example, if you're looking at a finance or telco or insurance, you can actually make sure that the customers are going to the content which you think they should actually be interested if they are on a certain journey, and then figure out where they break off or why they break off. In this case, obviously on e-commerce, sales funnel is something which is very intelligent. So you can see how many people are going to the homepage, are looking for a certain product, and in the end have a successful purchase of the item they were looking for. By the way, here is one of those things where you can see that this is not 100% real data. So this is from, like I said before, from my demo environment. Obviously, if we have a conversion rate of 7.45, that would be fantastic. And normally it's much lower than this. Other things which we can do, I already mentioned a little bit. So for example, abandoned cart rate percentage. So we can actually see how many people are putting something in their shopping cart but never do a successful checkout. So we can also then start digging in, why are they stopping? Is it of page performance? Do they encounter any type of errors, or they just drop off without any reason or indication? And the last two things, which I think are also very interesting, is the so-called users at risk. So those are actually users which somehow experience an error during one of their journeys on our web presence. So for example, they maybe face a 404, or they just have a JavaScript error which prohibits them from actually adding an item to the shopping basket, or doing a successful checkout, or paying with their credit card. And we can combine this with what we call, or what I called in this dashboard, total revenue at risk. So for example, what I'm doing here is I'm multiplying all the users which encounter an error with the actual amount which they have in the shopping cart while they have this error, and this is the amount which then I can see. Obviously, the main reason behind showing something like this is to showcase you that you can also use mathematical functions in those type of widgets, because the total revenue will of course be different for basically every single user of New Relic, and also different during different times of the year. So for example, on a Black Friday, obviously the chance of somebody coming back and trying to buy the item again is much smaller than during the rest of the week. So it's really important that you can actually get to the figure which represents the value which you are really interested in. One thing which I would like to highlight, or probably the most important number on this page, is this one here. So the availability or reliability of our application is not really that perfect. So it's not a happy number. What this means is obviously that we're not open for business 24/7, and people are not able to buy our stuff. And now we would actually try to figure out what's going on. So what I'm doing now, I'm going away from this very high level dashboard, and I'm jumping into a more detailed dashboard. And I know if I open this up, it will be lots of data which is coming to your way, but we don't have to go into all the details. So just look at a little bit the high level information, what's going on. Just to quickly explain what I have on the screen, this is something which I call a Springboard, which brings together a lot of information from different places in New Relic. So for example, on the top here, you can actually see information which I'm capturing from our APM agents. Then a little bit down here, I can see information which I'm capturing from our browser product, so real user monitoring. And then I combine it with information which I'm capturing from my mobile users, so Android and iOS users, and then I top it off with just some very high level information from my hosts which are running my applications, just to make sure that I'm fine in this perspective too. Now, what I'm interested here is to find out why do we have issues with our customers. And for example, if I look here, we can actually see in this widget the web portal duration, which is coming from APM. So my backend has a spike. Spikes are always something which is interesting, especially this one here, although it's not that big. So from 180 milliseconds, I'm spiking to like around 300 milliseconds. So actually, it's faster than a blink of the eye, and for the human, actually not even recognizable. But this is the backend. And if I just scroll down a little bit more, I see the direct correlation with my front end. So those are pages which my customers are actually using to buy our product or to look at our products. And you can actually see I have the same spike for my pages where I'm selling plans or phones to my customer. And this is obviously a horrible spike. So from 1.3 seconds, I'm spiking to 3.6 seconds. So it's basically 2.5 times slower than before. And obviously this is impacting my customers directly. So now I would like to figure out or drill deeper and see what's going on. How do I do that? The first thing, which is always interesting for the New Relic users, is to see in real time what's going on. This screen is something which is very powerful. It's called a health map, and it brings together two places where we actually collect information. So first of all, it's from the APM side, and second, it's from the infrastructure. So this means we are combining the view of how our applications are doing right now with how the infrastructure, which is running our applications, doing right now. Why is this important? Because of mean time to resolution. I need to figure out as fast as possible if something is not going as planned, where to spend my limited time. And there's no need for my team to split up, and one direction is running into the infrastructure side, the other side is running into the front end, and then figuring out in the end that it was the front end. So we have like half of the team which just spent time for nothing. And this will help me directly to figure out what's going on. What you can see on the screen is also a little bit the approach or the philosophy of New Relic. Although we are capturing, I think nowadays it's like 2.2 billion events and metrical data every single minute, which is an insane amount of data, we are not trying to overload our customers with all the data which we collect. So even if you have not seen New Relic before, this is quite easy to understand. Obviously, we have one application which is not happy right now, so we have two open violations. With one click, I can jump into this application to find out the root cause. One of them is actually alerting me right now, and the rest of them are actually happy. Obviously, I have some more information, so I can look at the key metrics, so aptex rates, throughput, error rate, and the response time, just to figure out how we're doing from this perspective. And like I said, as we are bringing 2 points of view together, I can also look at the show host button, and then I can see the hosts which are running this application. And from a host perspective, all my hosts are doing fine. So this means no need in investing time to see what's going on with the hosts. If you are on the call and think like, that's very nice, Patrick, but I'm really not that interested in the applications because I'm responsible for the host in our company. So what we can do is obviously switch this view around. And if I'm looking at this from the host perspective, you can actually see how this looks like for the hosts. And as you can see, all of my hosts are doing fine. So time for a coffee or a break, or watch my colleagues from 8 p.m. trying to figure out what's going on the application side. One thing which is really important here, you saw me, I had to scroll. A lot of our customers are running this type of health map in real time in one of their rooms or on an engineer's desktop. And obviously, if it runs on a flat screen somewhere, there's no chance, or normally no chance, to scroll around. And also, that's not something which you want to do. We as New Relic, we say you should actually instrument everything. So it could even be worse in terms of what type of host information you gather here. So you have all of your dev environments, pre-production, production, staging, and so on, you name it. And maybe you have like a couple of hundred or even thousands of hosts. And then obviously scrolling is not what you want to have. So what we are offering is actually very powerful filter sets which are applied dynamically. So for example, if I'm actually interested on how are my hosts doing, which are actually carrying applications which are customer facing, I can just set the filter, and it will show me the hosts which are adhering to this filter rules which I have set up. Those are applied dynamically. So for example, if you're in a dynamic environment or elastic environment and we are firing up a couple of hosts more because we have like a peak which we need to carry, they will show up inside here, and after they spin down again, they will go away. So we always have the real-time picture of what's happening right now. We can actually go one step deeper, and the next step is actually what we call the service maps. The service maps are the possibility to give me a real-time insights into my application landscape. So basically to see how my applications are linked together, the upstream and the downstream dependencies. We have some suggested maps which are building automatically, so there's no additional work you need to do. It's basically a built-in functionality of the agent. So once you actually click this, they just auto-discover themselves and they build the real map how they are actually interconnected. So in our case, let's see, for example, the highest trafficked applications in my demo application. And you see, I talked a lot and it's not really that interesting. It's basically those 3 applications and how they talk to each other. You can see I can move this around and I can see what's going on. Again, the proxy is still not happy. So basically with one click, I can go to the application. into my module of APM and drill down and figure out what's going on. But obviously we want to see a little bit more inside here. So what I can do is I can go to the map list and I can press discover my environment. And what will happen now is that all my agents are talking to each other and they're building me this huge dependency map. Obviously, if I have a lot of applications and entities instrumented, I can actually see how they are related and working together. Now, it's most probably really hard for you to see what's going on the screen right now, and I can tell you it's the same for me because it's really small. And if I scroll out, you can also understand why this is not really that important, because we also have this color scheme. So if you have a couple of thousand entities in here, it will be a huge map, and obviously then you need some sort of color coding to understand what's going on, or I can just come closer. By the way, those maps are fully customizable. So for example, if I'm looking at external services, I can just combine them. I'm not really interested in those. If I want the logging service and the billing service together, I can do that. If I'm not interested in a database, I can just kick it away. So I can build those maps according to what I'm responsible for or interested in, and then give it a name and save it. So for example, like I have done here, this is now the representation of the things which I'm responsible for. So you can see I have a web front end, which is served by this application, which is dependent on the plan service, which is dependent on the inventory service, and so forth and so forth. Why is this important, or what is this? Why is this powerful in today's microservices architecture or setup? It could be that I'm, for example, responsible for the inventory service, and suddenly I have an alert or a warning going on because my throughput fell, and I know that my team or I have not done anything to this application. So obviously, the first question is always what changed, what is different than before. And if I'm quite sure that I have not done anything, it could be because I have dependencies. And for example, maybe the colleagues from the web portal application, they had a push to production, or they changed something, and now maybe it's even now like distributed, the log going to a different place. Fact is, I have not the same amount of throughput which I had before. That's why I'm alerting. So this will help me to understand how the application as a whole is connected and why my particular application is spiking or dropping in throughput right now. So this is something which, like I said, is available for each and every single customer. This is being built automatically. There's nothing which you need to do. Basically, auto-discover, and you have the full picture of how your landscape is working together. Now, let's continue the story, because we have still not 100% figured out what's going on. So now what I'm doing is I'm going into my APM tab, which is the application performance monitoring, where I can actually see now my web portal, my service, what is happening. And you can see the spike which we saw before. And New Relic is very clickable, so I can just zoom into this and I can see a little bit more in detail what's going on. And without going into all the details, up here we can actually see how we are doing from a web transaction time. So all the transaction time, I can see it's correlating with the app text, which is basically the focus on the end user experience. I can also see it correlating with the throughput, and you can see, for example, right here, I have this spike in response time, but there's no correlating spike in throughput, so that it's not basically that we have so much traffic that the application is not able to handle it anymore. So this is already an indication what could be going on. I can see the error rate, so New Relic is capturing all the errors which the application is throwing for analytical purposes, so our developers can see which type of errors we are facing. And basically down here we have the thing which is most interesting right now. So all the transactions which are happening in our application are being captured, and New Relic is also capturing additional transaction traces to transactions which are potentially interesting. When is a transaction potentially interesting? When it's different or slower than the other. So for example, right in here, you can see the transaction browse plans, plans.jsp we have captured traces between 5.5, 4.8, 1.2 milliseconds, 1.2 seconds, and you can see the actual average response time is 200 milliseconds. So this is like 15 or 30 times slower than normal. So obviously quite interesting. So what we can do is right away click into the transaction trace and see what's going on. Now here in the transactions table, we basically see all the transactions have the most time-consuming ones, the ones which are being executed the most. So basically for us to filter down to the things which are most interesting to spend our time in the most interesting way. What I've seen now is this transaction trace graphical representation where the time has been spent. I can see all the components inside my transaction. I can even look at the trace details and can see for each and every single segment which has been executed, the timestamp. And so, for example, we are having color-coded information here. So those are the slow steps. And if I click down here, I can drill down into the actual stack trace. So meaning the code which has been executed in this application at the moment when this happened, when it was really slow. So this is obviously something which is very, very interesting to the developers, so they can actually see which type of code has been running and what it was doing on this particular timestamp. Now, there's more interesting stuff inside here. So if I close this, you can actually see I have something which is called distributed traces, which is basically a very powerful and kind of a newer way which New Relic, so this is something which New Relic released a couple of months ago, which helps you really to understand your microservices architecture and how the transactions are going through this whole architecture. So what you see, I can in the distributed tracing overview, I have actually drilled down right away to the transaction which I'm interested in, and you can see the graphical distribution of all those transaction traces which have been captured, and you can see that up here we have the slower ones, so all of them are here. What is really interesting, I have the trace duration, so how long it took, when it started, how many services were used, and how many spans, so basically units of work inside those services have been run during this time. So now if I click one of those, I get the graphical representation of this distributed trace which has been captured. And again, it will be really hard for you to see on the screen because it has so many spans. So let me just show you what we can do here. We can see the 3 services which have been used during this transaction, so the web portal, promo service, plan service, and we had 1016 spans. What you can see is I have here the browse plans, so the blue representation, 5.9 seconds. I have the coupons list which have been used, and you can see all of those services or sub-services or spans which have been executed. And now we have down here the get plans controller at get plans, which has more than 1000. And if I click on this one, we get a much clearer picture of why we have spent so much time. So if I scroll down really fast, you can see we have a ton of SQL statements, plan table select, which have been executed. If I click one of those, we can actually see that this is the actual query, and we can realize that this is an n+1 query, so not a really well executed query, which is being executed 1000 times. And obviously, even if we have one which is executing at 1.44 milliseconds, if we do that 1000 times, then overall the time for this transaction will increase to something which is not acceptable anymore. So we can see all of this information, the performance data. We can see the average time. What is also important, if we have a distributed system, we can see is this limited to just this host? Is it all hosts? You can see the span duration histogram for all of the spans. And obviously we have all the attributes, so all the additional metadata and information which we have captured around this span. So we can see the peer host name and so on. So it basically helps us to understand why have we been so slow right now. I also have some details here, so high-level information, which account, which service it's coming from, the time span, and so on. And if I will, for example, click here, I will go to the database analytical information, which I have captured to figure out what's going on inside here. So coming back to the start point of our story, we had a very slow, or we had a spike in one of our services, and we were able to basically just drill down and see that this is coming from a SQL statement which has been written badly, and that's why it's impacting our front-end customers, and that's why we have a degrading user experience. So with just a couple of clicks, I can get to the root cause of why we are actually impacting our customers. Obviously, there's much more information inside here, but because of time, I will continue with my overview. So the next thing which I would like to highlight is the actual front end, so the real user monitoring. New Relic as a platform can monitor everything from the front end through the application until the back end, and now we are focusing on the front end. So you can actually see that this information which we see right here is quite similar to what we saw before. Obviously, it's a little bit different. So this is now all from the real user experience. So we can see how much time has been spent in the web application, the network, the DOM processing, the page rendering, And we can also see the throughput by browser, so we can actually understand which type of browsers are our customer using to come to our page, what they're doing. And what we are also doing, we can actually highlight this information not just for normal browser pages, but also for single page applications. And also it's very important to capture the information which is handled asynchronous. So for example, everything in Ajax, so we can make sure that this is working perfectly. And we are capturing each and every single JavaScript error which is happening on the site. You remember before when I showed you the transaction traces, obviously there in front end, there is no transaction trace. So we are actually capturing session traces from real customers. So we can actually see from a performance view what happened with those page views inside the customer's browser. If I continue this, we can actually look at all those page views. Again, we can see each and every single page view which has been viewed. We can see how performant they are, how slow. If I click one of them, we can also get something which is very powerful in terms of comparison data. If we are using at the same time, like we are using real user monitoring, the synthetic solution from New Relic, we can actually overlay this information and give us an information about how we are comparing to the synthetic monitoring right now. So normally synthetic monitoring is a little bit more performant because it's a well-regulated environment where they are always executed exactly the same, while real end users are a little bit harder to categorize because you have different types of laptops, different types of desktop systems, browser, and so on and so forth. So this is something which we can right away see here, how we're doing compared to our synthetics users, the historical performance, so how we are doing now compared to yesterday, and all of this information is here. If I continue this, I can actually look at so-called session traces. Like I said, those are session traces which have been captured from real users. The goal here is to give your front-end developer a wide array of different environments, so like different types of browsers, different type of versions, different pages, and so we can actually drill down and see what's going on. So for example, this page view here has not been really that great. So if I look at this, you will notice this looks quite like the Chrome developer tools. So you can actually see how this user experienced the page load. So you can see from the backend perspective, everything which has happened in his browser. So the request start, the response start, the onload event here when we have the DOM loading starting, and we see each and every single asset which has been loaded. And maybe there's even an issue. So for example, here we have an error going on, and you can see there has been a JavaScript which timed out, and you can see the stack trace. So this is again something which is really, really powerful for your front-end developers to understand how this page or those pages are being loaded in the real customers' browsers. One thing which is really powerful is also the JavaScript errors, and I'm not 100% sure if we actually talked about this, but New Relic is also using, let's say, machine learning and also applied intelligence, which is basically our take on artificial intelligence. And what we're doing here with the JavaScript errors is we are bringing the JavaScript errors into a view which is much more, let's say, digestible for a human being. So obviously, if you're a huge brand and you have millions of page views, potentially you have millions of JavaScript errors, and this can overload your developers quite easily and quite fast. So what we are doing is we are combining them, what makes sense, and what we are doing is we are setting so-called error profiles. Error profiles, like I said, are built to make it easier to understand, figure out what you should actually tackle first. So for example, from all of those 2,444 errors which I have, 89 have the same error class. So I can see what's going on here. They are coming, 67% of them have the same error, the same transaction. So this already helps me to figure out where I should spend my time, because if I'm jumping into this login, obviously login is something which should work. But for example, if I look at the phone's JSP, it's 5%, while the other pages are impacting much more my users, my customers. So it really helped me to figure out where I should spend my time first. Obviously, I have more information, so I can filter down into each and every single error. I can see which type of browsers are they occurring, how my users are experiencing them. And what we can also do is basically look at the error instances itself. And if we have the source code or the source map for our JavaScript, we will have the possibility to unminify the captured JavaScript on the application and map it directly to your source code, to your source map, and then you can actually see exactly which line of code the JavaScript error actually appeared. So this is something which is really powerful and helps you really to focus on where you have the low-hanging fruit and how to figure out what to tackle first. As New Relic is a fully a global solution, and obviously if you're acting globally, this is something which is very powerful too. So this is now not anymore my demo environment. This is now New Relic monitoring New Relic. So for those of you which have seen the Leonardo DiCaprio movie Inception, this is exactly this. It's a little bit mind-bending, but so we are monitoring New Relic with New Relic. So this is how you can actually see this. So right now, if I click on South Africa, we can actually see how pages are being loaded from this area of the continent. I can see each and every single page URL which has been looked at in the last 30 minutes. I can look at the device type which people are using, how long it takes for them. I can look at the iOS agent versions and so on. I can even look at stuff which is actually not really, or normally not related to my service which I'm offering. So for example, if I look at the ISPs which people are using to come to my website, I can also look at this. Even if this is not something which I can directly influence. So for example, if I have 80% of the users using, let's say Vodacom, and Vodacom has an outage, I understand that it's not my issue, but I can actually have the support message out there, people on the phone, on Twitter, Facebook, telling them where the error is occurring, and that this third party is actually working right now in solving this. I already talked a little bit about basically the twin brother of real end user monitoring, which is called synthetic monitoring. Synthetic monitoring is the possibility to do basically the same like we have in real user monitoring, but without the real users. So those are basically virtual users which are running in data centers around the world, which are coming to your systems and checking if they are up and running and what they're doing in terms of performance. So what I have built here is something which a lot of our customers are doing, and this is basically a comparison of different types of football teams, mainly in Germany. So I used to do this with other brands, but then sometimes people are not that happy. So if I take for German football teams, it's most probably not that bad. So you can see it's Bayern Munich, Leipzig, BFB, Köln, Hertha, and you can see actually I'm looking at the main page how they're doing, and obviously Bayern is, if you just look at this one, not really that great, but it's actually not that bad how it appears here. Most probably I don't have time to go into this today, but obviously you can believe that the German teams, they know a little bit what they're doing also on the web, so it's not that bad. You can see the response status. We can compare each and every one of them. You can actually see how they are doing across the globe, and stuff like this I can break out, and then I can do very interesting stuff. So for example, I'm looking at the largest assets on the sites of those clubs. And what I have found is, for example, a picture like this one here on Hertha BSC. And you can see this is a huge picture. So this is more than 3 megabytes in size, 3.3 megabytes. And obviously this is slowing down the user experience. This is actually putting strain on the bandwidth and so forth. So this is something which should be very easily fixed. And with a solution like New Relic Synthetics, it's very easy to spot something like this. Obviously, it's not limited to pictures and JPEGs and videos and stuff like this. If there's a JavaScript which is blocking and stuff like this, we can also figure this out right away. So how does this look like? If I run a test like this, you can actually see this is a test which has been run in the last 60 minutes. You can see the timeline, so we can actually see each and every single item which has been requested, all the types, how long they take. And if I look at the duration, you can actually again see this 3.2 megabyte in size takes 800 milliseconds. So obviously quite easy to spot. But what sometimes is actually more interesting is stuff like this. So we have a picture which is only 5.18 kilobytes in size, so very, very tiny, but still it takes 222 milliseconds. If I click on this one here, I can actually see where it's coming from. So this is this language PNG. I can look at the resource. So it looks like this, obviously, and I can actually see how it has been downloaded. It was blocked, how it's sent. I waited a long time, so we can look at the response, the request. We can actually track this in one of our dashboards to figure out if this is changing over time. And obviously, this is really helping us to make the end user experience much more faster and more optimal, so they don't have any issues consuming your sites. in order to continue, I would like to jump now to the piece of the full platform story, which is the infrastructure. So obviously, I already showed you how we are doing from a front-end perspective. Now I would like to show you how we are looking from an infrastructure point of view. So what we can see here on, and I actually have a filter in there, so I take this filter away. So what you can see here is all the hosts which I'm monitoring, and it doesn't matter if those are physical hosts, if it's VMs, or if it's something which is running in the cloud. We have the possibility to show all of this information. I'm not going into all the details of infrastructure monitoring because, as you most probably know, infrastructure monitoring is a commodity. This is something which basically each and every of our customers is doing or has done already even before using New Relic. So this is basically something which you need to do anyway. So I would like to highlight some of the things which we are doing a little bit different or hopefully are interesting. So first of all, we can actually see what's going on here from a CPU perspective, load. So this is again an overview which tells us what's going on, and we are correlating this with events. So what does this mean in terms of events? We are showing you if there's something going on an event. So for example, we can actually see that we had certain alerts going on. We can see that people have connected to our account, that there has been packages removed, packages instrumented. So we can actually see exactly in a timeline who did what on which type of host and how does this impact my overall perspective. So this is something which is really, really powerful. And again, like I said, we are correlating this with the information which you can see on the screen. So for example, if something spikes and a package has changed, there could be most probably that there is direct correlation going on. What is also interesting, obviously, we can filter this down to your applications. So for example, if I'm looking at one of my, let's say, my Proxy West. So this is, again, those are all my hosts which are carrying a customer-facing application. And you can see this is the application. This is how it's doing. And what I can do is actually I can correlate this with the application response time. So I can actually see that this spike in this host Proxy West 2 is actually correlating with the application response time. So we can actually drill down and figure out what's going on inside here. What I can also quickly do or show you is obviously we are capturing all of this type of network information, transmitted bytes per receive bytes and so on. We can look at the storage. So this helps you to figure out how you're doing in terms of storage. How long will it take until my disk space is used? Do I have to spin up more disk space? Or also if we are running not just in a on-site environment, but for example, more in a cloud environment, we want to see how the disk utilization is from a host perspective. So obviously, if you're running in a type where we just pay the service and we're only using 53% of the disk service which we're paying for, we're probably underutilizing this. So different way. So basically, we can figure out are we overpaying, or can we use a smaller instance and stuff like this. For the processes, this is very interesting. So we can see each and every single process which is running on my infrastructure. So what I can do is, for example, I can filter down and I can see all of the stuff which is running inside the container. So I can say I want to see everything which is running inside the container. And then I can see everything, all the processes which are running in containers. I can actually go on the container image, and then I can compare all my images across all my infrastructure, how they're doing right now. So this is, again, something which can be very powerful to understand your containerization strategy. This was a little bit fast. The last thing which I would like to highlight here is our integration. So out of the box, New Relic is delivered with more than 30, I think like 33 different AWS integrations, like 10 or 12 Azure, a couple of Google Cloud Platform, and over 200 on-host integrations, either directly from us or the possibility with open source to bring information into New Relic. What is really powerful here, once you have basically deployed an agent on one of those, for example, EC2 instances in AWS, what you can do is basically connect your AWS account, so basically a role with New Relic, and then we are capturing a lot of information directly from AWS. So all this information around CloudWatch is coming to us. And then obviously, because we're a technology partner, we also have access to certain APIs, which you normally don't get. So for example, we can build out dashboards directly for billing and cost budgets. So you can actually see how much money you're spending in your Amazon environments. The nice thing, as soon as you have built this integration, with one mouse click, you have this information available in a dashboard. So for example, if I click here, you can actually see a budget dashboard. So you can actually see which type of usage each and every single provider has. You can see the cost, where it's going, where it's coming from. So really help you to understand how your cloud spend is going. If you're looking at an EC2 environment, again, this is a highly curated view built together with AWS and all our customers. So with one click, you have all of this information about all your AWS regions, the instance state, how it's doing, the events, which I showed you before. So all of this information is there without the need for you to build a dashboard yourself or going into this. And the last thing which I would like to quickly highlight are our on-host integrations. Like I said, we have 18 which have been built directly from New Relic, and we have more than 250 which are coming from other sources, which you can also set up very, very easily. But the one which I would like to talk about is the Kubernetes dashboard. This is something which we recently released and is having a lot of interest with our customers. So on Kubernetes, obviously, we have this dashboard. If I click the dashboard, this information is quite similar to what you get on other vendors or from other applications, which lets you monitor Kubernetes. So you can see all the cores, the nodes, namespace, pods, containers. All of this information is here. But honestly, most probably, if I show you something like this, although maybe the information is quite interesting, it basically looks more like a JSON Pollock picture than something which you waited your whole life on to get this information out. Obviously, as I showed you before, with the infrastructure module, I can get out each and every single line. I have an alert on each and every single line. But if I look at this like in a sideways glance or on a dashboard, it doesn't really tell me that much. So what we have done is we have come up with a new way of monitoring Kubernetes, a Kubernetes cluster, which is called the Kubernetes Cluster Explorer, which gives you a much more visual way and an easier way to understand how your Kubernetes cluster is doing right now. So what you can see on the screen is now one of those Kubernetes clusters which I'm monitoring, and you can see immediately what's going on. So we have all my nodes here. I can see each and every single node, how much memory, CPU, and so on it's going on, the pods which are running here, and some of the pods which have some issues. So for example, if I look at the middle, I have here 2 pods which have not been distributed anywhere in this cluster. So if I click on this one here, I can understand why. So you can see I have 3 critical warnings. The status is pending, the namespace is interactions, and we can actually see that it's an invalid image name. So that's why this has not been able to pull, and it was not able to actually deploy this pod in order like I intended to it. So that's why I have those 2 pods which are not being executed or running right now. What is also very powerful is I see each and every single one of those pods which is running here. So if I click on those, I can actually see the CPU and everything which is going on inside those pods. And if I have a pod which is also running an application which has been instrumented with New Relic APM agents, I can actually see which type of application and how this application is doing right now. So we can actually see that we have a warning going on here, and I know if for example the CPU or the memories, the CPU is spiking or the memory is running out on this node, I can see immediately which type of application will be impacted and what does this mean ultimately for my customers. On the other way around, obviously, if my APM or my application is throwing or doing stuff which I'm not actually wanting it to do, or it's being slow, I have the same information which I have showed you in the very beginning of my demonstration inside here as well. So for example, if I'm running this on a distributed tracing environment, with one click, I'm jumping into the distributed trace for this application, and I can start to figure out what is going wrong with my application inside this Kubernetes cluster. And that's how we can really monitor from front to end, give you total visibility and see all the connections inside one signal solution. I know this was quite fast, and obviously I was not able to touch on all the things, all the details. More than happy to have any type of follow-ups, but with this, I'm having hand back over to Kevin. And
thank you, Patrick.
No worries.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. So if there are any questions, please do type them into the chat section or the question section of the webinar, of the GoToWebinar, and we will be happy to answer those questions. Patrick, while we're waiting for to see if there are any questions, sure. I know about 17 hours ago there was an announcement was made that New Relic has released New Relic 1.
Yes.
Can you comment on that and maybe just give us a few of the highlights of the new platform?
Absolutely. So I actually was thinking if I can already show you this, but the announcement was made, and actually today is the launch date. But obviously the US is only getting up and running right now, so my demo environment is not yet actually fully enabled. But what does this mean? I can very quickly show you, because
Fantastic.
Obviously the first thing which is always being updated is the documentation, and obviously everything which we have, which is customer facing. So what we are doing right now, or what we are releasing today, is New Relic 1, which basically is like a new type of approach on how to work in your environment. So it's totally entity focused. So it doesn't matter, like I showed you before, if something is going wrong in a pod or on a host or anything, we will always be able to see what this means in context. So we have things like the possibility to show you how all of those entities are interconnected, how they're dependent on each other. So like dependency maps. So you can actually see immediately how you're impacted by anything which is going wrong, or how you impact anything, all the other services which are running around you. One thing which is also very powerful in New Relic 1 is that we are basically taking away the whole need to understand how you have set up your accounts and all of your sub accounts and everything which is running in there. So we have a very powerful feature or search features which help you find any type of entity, any type of namespace, any type of let's say data point which you're interested in, and it will surface this as fast as possible. Then we have the possibility to have stuff which you're interested in right now on the very forefront of your entry point into New Relic 1. So if you're running, for example, something which in pre-production, which is going to production right now, you can actually favorite it, and without going to all of those clicks which I showed you before, you always have it front and center and understand what's going on right away. Then what you also have the possibility is, let me see if I can see something here. Yeah, to use new types of dashboards. So the dashboards which I showed you before are already very, very powerful, but they have some limitations. With the new types of dashboards, we have much more possibility and flexibility. So it's not just limited to all the data which you have captured in New Relic and you can make it visible. It's also the possibility to have, so for example, have service maps inside this type of dashboard. You can build it out. You have the possibility to make it intelligent. So for example, make it clickable and stuff like this. So it's something which is really making the most of the data which you have collected. And talking about the most of what you have collected right now, so today we didn't have the time to actually look how you build those type of dashboards, but basically there's a query language behind it, which is called NRQL, so New Relic query language. And it's actually a well-defined query language, quite easy to understand, but obviously New Relic is a solution which is also addressing business issues, and it should be is heavily used by business users, and for them a query language, even if it's an easy to understand one, is difficult, and so we have a high barrier of people which don't have a technical background getting into this type of analytical workbench. And what we are offering now with our dashboards is like a dashboard creator, which basically lets you build very powerful dashboards with just a point and click interface. So it's very easy, even for non-technical people, to build very meaningful dashboards in a very fast way to basically to get to the information which you're interested the most.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for that overview of the new release, and
No problem.
don't forget, it's great to be able to hear about it on day one over here. So if there's a question over here that you demoed against AWS, will it work for other hyperscale cloud environments?
Yes, absolutely.
So you want to answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I was most probably a little bit fast. So, as New Relic is a I mean, we are now 1,800 employees worldwide, so we are a sizable company, but we also have limited resources. And obviously, so one of the most important cloud providers is strategy is to do what the leader in this space is doing. So we have a very tight integration with AWS. Like I said, we have around 33 or even more integrations out of the box available, but we also have the same in place with Azure and Google Cloud, which by the way also have a high focus on the roadmap for this year. So like I said, we have more out of the box integrations with Azure than any other cloud or monitoring provider out there. You can see them or most of them right here. So they have the exactly same functionality like the AWS ones. So you basically just deploy them and you link the systems together, and then you have all of these insights, all of this information available. And what we also have on top of everything which I just showed you, we have an SDK which all of our users can actually use. So if you have like a certain cloud provider which we do not support out of the box, you have the possibility to use the SDK to get information out which we are not providing with one of the available integrations or one of the many open source integrations which are out there. So you can actually basically all the time build your own integration in any type of cloud environment or even on-host environment and bring data into New Relic.
Fantastic.
By the way, I'm sorry, I know this was a long answer, but we are not limited to getting information through an agent. So any type of information you have available, you can send them to New Relic Insights over the API as a JSON file or whatever, anytime, and we can show information in dashboards alongside any other information in order to better understand what's going on.
Great, a great ability to ingest information from various sources.
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Patrick, so much. Looking at this world of understanding the information of what's happening in your system, if you are providing a system and your customers are using an application of yours, I want to liken it to an experience that I had in my youth. That I went on a particular date, and picked up the date and opened the door for her. She got into the car. We drove to a restaurant. It was a Mexican restaurant that we went to, and we had dinner. And afterwards, I took her home, and I had a wonderful time. I really thought that it was a great date. And I let a week go by, and I did send her a message the next day. But after a week, I said we'd like to go out again, and she said no, she didn't want to. And I said, well, why not? I thought we had a wonderful time. And she said, well, when you picked me up, you were a little bit late to pick me up. So firstly, I had to wait for you to pick me up. Then when we got in the car, you drove like a maniac to get there. It wasn't a very comfortable journey. The seat didn't feel comfortable at all. At the restaurant, I don't like Mexican food, and it actually took ages for us to get the meal, and I was really starving. And you spoke the whole night, and I hardly got a word in edgeways. So, from me, who was giving the actual experience, and let's call it the application side, it felt like it was a wonderful evening. But the user had a completely different experience, and it wasn't good. And this is why it's so important, if you look at that analogy, to actually know what your users are experiencing and to know whether they are having a good experience. So with that wonderful analogy, I don't think you've heard that analogy before, Patrick.
No, that's the first time.
Yes.
But it made quite an impression that you still remember that you had Mexican food.
Yes. So with that in mind, I want to thank Patrick Din for joining us. I want to thank Abdul for joining us as well. Yeah, please, if you have any questions, do email them to us. You can see on your screen at the moment, there's all of our contact information. It's info@kaskade.cloud. Follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as well. There we are. There's our phone number as well. So do get in touch with us if you want to know anything about New Relic, or you would want to do a POC, for example, and we would be keen to engage with you. So thanks so much. Thanks, Patrick, and have a great rest of your day.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. Have a nice day, guys.
Bye-bye.